are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to a different webinar today. We're not delivering new training, we are seeking your input. My name is Rosie Patterson and I'm moderating the webinar. And we'll run the webinar for about 40 minutes and we'll want your input. So on the screen in a minute, next slide, thanks Joe, you will see the webinar tools where you can type in your feedback. And our presenters today are Zia Rice and Joe Grobler. And welcome to you both. How are you, Zia?
Good, thanks, Rosemary. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And you're in the hot weather. We're in the cool in Melbourne. And your bio says that you joined ARRB in 2016 after 5 years of consulting as a geotechnical engineer. And you have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and a master's of pavement technology. And it says that you led a number of Warrup and NACO projects with a focus on granular pavement material topics and are currently undertaking an Austroads project investigating fit-for-purpose use of available materials. So I guess that keeps you really busy.
Yes, very busy, Rosemary, but all good.
Awesome. And that's a great bio. And welcome to you, Joe. How are you?
Hi, Rosemary. Fine, thanks. And thanks for having us here today.
That's been great. And I think it's your last gig, isn't it? So we'll move to get started. But firstly, your bio, Joe, says that you're a specialist pavement engineer and principal professional leader at ARRB. And your experience includes initial and detailed pavement assessments and material investigations, mechanistic modelling, detailed design, material specifications and construction phase services. And as ARRB's agreement manager for the NACO in Queensland, you're also responsible for the delivery of a large multidisciplined annual research program in collaboration with Queensland Department of Transport in main roads. Is that right, Joe?
Yes, yeah, no, it's good to have a client with the foresight to do that type of research and development work, and I'm proud to be part of that.
Awesome. So you've both been out and about now. As I said before, this is your last gig and people can send questions through and we're looking forward to hearing all about it. So let's get started.
Thank you, Rosemary. I will start off with to provide the first portion of the webinar, and then I'll hand over to Zia to cover the remaining of the topics. So just a brief outline of the webinar itself. We'll go through some introductions, just if you're not familiar with ARRB, the Australian Road Research Board, to tell you a bit more about us. Then I'll provide you with some more background to this particular project and what we're aiming to achieve. Then Zia will go on from there and provide you some more detail on the workshop outreach program that we've been running so far, as well as provide you with some feedback from those workshops. And at the end, we'll provide you with details where you can provide or give feedback or input into these guides. So let's start off first with who is ARRB. So we've been around for about 60 years, being the independent source of expert transport knowledge throughout the country. We're Australia's national transport research organisation, and we focus primarily on applied research to provide sustainable, safe and reliable infrastructure. We have a number of offices spread out through Australia, including Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, Sydney and Adelaide. And then we also have our state-of-the-art materials laboratory at our head office in Melbourne. We are divided into 5 strategic working groups that are sourced to provide you fit-for-purpose solutions to our nation's biggest transport challenges and needs, both now and in future. So the 5 working groups include a future transport infrastructure working groups, primarily focused on pavement materials, structures, and our research laboratory facilities. Then we have our future transport infrastructure technology group, focused on network operations and planning, intelligent transport systems, and advanced mobility technologies. We also have our transport safety group that looks after its safety policy, transport user behavior, safe road systems and infrastructure, as well as safe mobility. We also have a sustainability and resilience working group focused on the efficient running of our country's road networks, including the use of recycled materials, constructing and designing more sustainable and resilient pavements, as well as transport policy. And then finally, we have our next generation asset management team that are mainly focused on data collection, infrastructure performance, intelligent asset management, and transport economics. But we're also well known for our data collection services, with one of our newer devices being the Intelligent Pavement Assessment Vehicle, or better known as the iPave. This vehicle can measure pavement deflections, automated crack detection, rutting, roughness, texture, and video at highway speeds with no disruption to the traffic flow. So we currently have 2 of these vehicles available, both in Australia and in New Zealand. The advantage of this is that we can use the data to import into our management tool that provide you with a one-stop shop for viewing and interrogating the data. And everything is obviously geo-referenced and provide you with some handy visual displays. And then the latest addition to our fleet is the Intelligent Safe Surface Assessment Vehicle, also known as the iSafe, which continuously measures skid resistance, rutting, texture, geometry, and digital imagery, again in a single pass without any disruption to the traffic. So this vehicle is an excellent tool for you to be able to take functional and condition surveys across your network or a particular project. That's just a brief introduction to the Australian Road Research Board. So we'll get on to the project in more detail now. So this particular project received federal funding in 1920 to provide enhanced guidance for local government to better meet their asset management and maintenance needs. So as part of this funding, we are developing a number of best practice guides, as well as a new method to determine the remaining life of sprayed seals. However, this particular workshop webinar will focus on the development of the best practice guides only. As part of the project, we will develop 4 best practice guides, including a guide for road materials, a guide for unsealed roads, a guide for sealed roads, and a guide for bridge management, with the purpose and focus of these guides being on providing improved road infrastructure, asset management, and maintenance knowledge to local road authorities. As some of you may already be aware, we have a couple of road manuals already in place, including the Unsealed Local Roads Manual, the Sealed Local Roads Manual, and the Local Roads Bridge Management Manual. These manuals have been in existence for quite a while. The Unsealed Manual was last updated in 2009, the Sealed Manual in 2005, and the Bridge Manual in 1999. So you can see that it's about time for these manuals to be updated. So what we'll be doing is we'll develop new best practice guides based on the contents of these manuals, as well as include any new information that became available since the guides were last updated. And then we'll also work on a new delivery platform that's more in line with your needs in the modern age. So that's basically the purpose of this project. I'm going to hand over to my co-presenter now, Zia Rice, and in the meantime, if there's any questions, feel free to send them through.
We have got questions, Joe and Zia. The question from Stuart is there any information on the dust suppressants in road construction, focusing on impacts on compaction / bitumen / seal, relevant during the current period of drought water restrictions? And Jasmine's is similar, but maybe a bit extended. Do you have any plans to review the numerous products in relation to dust suppression? Would you like me to read this one again, or did you get it?
No, look, I've got it. Thank you. So that's a question that's been coming up in a number of these workshops that we've been holding throughout the country. And yes, it is a very relevant topic at the moment because there's a number of products like that available on the market, and how to effectively assess those projects is important. As far as the guides will go, our current unsealed guide does provide some information regarding non-traditional products such as dust suppressants. So we propose to include that guidance into the new guide as well and provide updates where relevant. But those guidelines will always only be generic. So we do have a process in place called TIPES, which is a Transport Infrastructure Product Evaluation Scheme that's being administered by ARRB, that can evaluate the benefits of these products independently. So yes, we'll provide some generic guidelines in the best practice guide, but then would recommend that you consider the TIPES application to assess the benefits of these particular products.
Awesome. One more we've got a comment from Jasmine to pass on to you as well. But there's one more from Prageeth. Is there any guidance latest available for unsealed road inspection and condition ranking?
That will be part of the new best practice guide. So we propose to include a section on inspections and condition surveys.
Beautiful. And we've just had one coming from Tom. Have any of these products passed the TIPES scheme?
So for dust suppression products, not. We have some. We have a particular product that passed the TIPES assessment scheme that relates to unbound granular stabilization.
Cool. Okay, let's get moving then. Over to Zia.
Thanks, Rosie. Thanks, Joe. Rosie, you can see my screen okay now?
We can. Fantastic.
Perfect. All right. So, hi everybody. So I'm going to take us through the 4 new guides and what we think at a minimum should be included. So the contents points that I'm going to go through, they shouldn't be considered as constraints to the guide contents, because they're simply intended to be a bit of a starting point for us to populate the remaining contents and to get you, give you guys an idea of what we're trying to achieve with these new guides. So first up, we have the materials guide, which I have the pleasure of putting together. There currently isn't a dedicated materials guide. So previously Joe showed you a few of the ARB guides. There's an unsealed roads and a sealed roads and a bridges manual. And the materials information is tied up into those manuals. So this guide will touch on things such as material extraction from pits and quarries, also lab testing, so understanding what different tests are and also how they influence pavement performance. Also providing guidance on stabilisation techniques and the best and how to choose the best stabilisation agent based on the material properties and the design scenario. And also other material management techniques such as blending, screening, handling and placement techniques, because these affect the material's ability to perform in a pavement system, either in a good way or a bad way. So really providing some guidance around those things. We're also anticipating providing guidance on simple low-cost techniques for assessing materials. So being able to understand your material in the context of your project, including your design, traffic and your climate, because these play a major role in material performance, especially naturally occurring materials. And finally, for the materials guide, how to treat a material to minimise poor performance. So this flows on from the assessment of materials. So once you understand how your material might perform based on your project location and traffic, what you can do and what can be undertaken to ensure that you get the best performance out of that material. Again, really relevant for naturally occurring materials. You might only have one source available. So what you can do with that source to make it work for a whole range of different scenarios. Next we have the Unsealed Roads Guide, which Joe's putting together with his team. And this guide will focus on best practice in material selection for different components of an unsealed road pavement. So there's a bit of overlap with the materials guide, but this will be more specific, and the material guide more general. So also looking at best practice in construction, maintenance and geometric road design, and incorporating safety and environmental considerations into unsealed roads as well. The Unsealed Roads Guide will also provide resources to allow benchmarking to unsealed road management, so providing guidance on how to understand your unsealed road assets on your network. I think we just had a question about that previously, so that will definitely be included. And also covering more practical things such as defect identification guidance, and also information on assessing the likely cause and the best way to treat that defect to ensure it isn't a recurring issue but is fixed right the first time. The Sealed Roads Guide is very similar to the Unsealed Roads Guide. It will include best practice for new pavement design, construction, sealing, asphalt surfacings, as well as covering maintenance and rehabilitation. And again, providing guidance on how to understand your sealed road assets on your network, and providing guidance to benchmark these assets as well. And also covering sealed road defects and failure identification, similar again to the Unsealed Guide, and providing guidance and information on assessing the likely cause and the best way to treat that defect to ensure that, it isn't a recurring issue but it's fixed right the first time. So enabling you to go out into your road network, identify failures, understand the best fix, and put that into practice. The final guide we're working on as part of this project is a bridge management guide. So the materials and the sealed and the unsealed roads guides are, expected to have a little bit of overlap, whereas the bridge management guide is kind of anticipated to be more of a standalone resource. So the focus areas for the bridge guide will include guidance on establishing a bridge asset management system, which will be appropriate for local government needs, and also providing information on the different levels of bridge inspections and what each level requires to be undertaken at a minimum. Similar to the Unsealed and Sealed Roads Guide, the Bridge Guide will also include guidance on identifying common problems and defects, and this will cover all types of bridges, so timber, concrete, steel and masonry bridges. And there will also be guidance on how to undertake an economic evaluation of the different repair options for major defects. So being able to understand the different options available to fix your bridge, and being able to choose the most budget efficient repair option out of those. So these are they're the guides that we're developing. And we're developing them to be specific to local government needs. So to ensure that we can capture these needs, we undertook a national outreach program where we held workshops all over Australia, and the intention of that was to get feedback from local government and really understand what else, besides from the points that I've just run through, what else needs to be included in these guides. So the purpose of the workshops was to gather input from local government, but also from industry and consultants who work closely with local government. And the purpose was really to understand the challenges that local government face when dealing with materials, sealed and unsealed roads, as well as bridges. So we were also looking to understand the gaps in the current resources. So the current ARB guides, they haven't been updated for a while. So what the gaps in the current resources are, and also what local government priorities are. So through this feedback, we intend to tailor the contents of the guides that I just presented to really suit the needs of local government. So we've just wrapped up, or we've got a couple happening at the moment, but at the end we'll have held a total of 20 workshops in 19 locations. And we did this through August and September. So the map on the slide just marks out the locations where we held workshops. Unfortunately, we can't get to everyone, so that's kind of the point of the webinar today. This is one of our last outreach activities before we go back to the office and collate all the feedback. So the webinar is a good chance to outreach to those who couldn't make a workshop or didn't know about it in time. So we've talked to over 300 participants face-to-face during these workshops, and we've reached about 100 different local government authorities across Australia. And we've also had attendance by NatSpec, IPWEA, and also WALGA representatives, which has been really great. So what have we learnt so far from these workshops? I'm going to go through some of the recurring themes which we identified from the first half of the workshops that we held in August. We still need to collate some of our feedback from the ones that have just happened recently, but we definitely identified some recurring themes. So the most important one, which came up at nearly every workshop, is that the guide contents must be practical, simple and easy to read. There needs to be a balance between technical information and basic knowledge, and this is to make sure that the guides can be applicable to all levels within local government and not just people with technical roles. So to do this, we envision including references to external resources. So if more technical information is needed by a reader, the guides will include these external references where the reader can go as a way to keep these guides streamlined and uncomplicated. The next issue that came up quite a bit was the accessibility of the guides. I don't think Joe mentioned it, but as these guides are funded by the federal government, they will be available free of charge. So when we do publish them, they'll be free to download off our website, and there'll be no charge involved. But what we do understand is the format needs to be easy to navigate, and it needs to be available both online and offline. The older manuals that we went through before come in A4 lever arch files. They're cumbersome and they usually get put on a shelf, and they're not easy to navigate. So the point of these guides will really be functional, practical information. Endorsement of the guides from state road authorities and other organisations such as NatSpec, IPWEA and ALGA and other industry bodies, that was also an important point raised. I just want to reiterate that these guides, they're not intended to be specifications, and they're not intended to be replacements of other technical specifications that are already out there, whether it be state road authority, etc. The guides will simply be a knowledge tool. However, we will still ensure that the contents of these guides are endorsed by the relevant agencies. Other recurring topics included recycled materials, which is a very hot topic at the moment, asset management, and also people want to focus on maintenance works, which is a lot of what local government undertake is maintenance and rehab rather than new design and construction. Local governments also see the guides as a potential avenue for knowledge sharing, to include things like success stories or failures of new or existing technology. So a way of understanding what other councils are doing and if these techniques might work for them to save them money and produce better outcomes. During the workshops, it's really good to see people from different councils, nearby interact and understand, oh, you're doing this. We haven't tried that. We were scared to try it. You've had a good outcome. Well, maybe I'm going to go back and see if we can implement that. So these guides will be a bit of a knowledge transfer tool as well to really let people understand what technology is out there and how it might work for them. And finally, from the feedback, the guides need to contain relevant information to help local governments make informed decisions and guidance on how to prioritise maintenance and rehabilitation programs. So, as I mentioned before, local government, they're involved heavily in maintenance and rehab programs of their network. So really understanding how to maximise their budget and understand their assets, some of that guidance needs to be included in these guides. So after hearing about what this project is about and what the guides are intended to be, if you have any new ideas after this webinar, please send them through to our email address, which is here. So guides@arb.com.au. So this is a general email address that we set up to ensure that we captured everyone's ideas, both from the workshops and from the webinar. Or you can also send through your questions via the webinar toolbar on the side there. Rosie's already given us a few questions. Like I said earlier, we've almost wrapped up our workshop program, but this webinar is intended to enable those who couldn't come to a workshop or didn't know about them until it was too late to still have their say about the new guides. If you also have any general questions about ARB and our services, Joe went through a little bit at the start of the webinar, or if you have any capability inquiries, please also send it through to guides@arb.com.au, and it will be directed to the right person who will contact you. So just before we wrap up the formal presentation today, we have also had quite a few questions regarding the other workshops which are run around the country. So we offer an unsealed roads workshop as well as a bridge inspection workshop, and for these we can come to you, or we can host these at one of our offices in either Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, Perth or Adelaide. They're multi-day workshops where we cover technical learning and also get into the field to do some practical hands-on learning. So a little bit different from the Best Guides workshop that we've been doing across Australia, where we've been asking for people's input. These other workshops that we run are really technical learning and hands-on workshops. So please jump onto our website if you'd like to learn more about those. So that our website is just arb.com.au/workshops, and you should find some information about those. And finally, we also have our Smart Pavement Now event coming up next week, starting on the 18th of September. And this will be held at our state-of-the-art facility in Port Melbourne, our head office. And this is a 3-day masterclass event aimed at the pavement industry, which will provide hands-on learning and showcase the latest trends, emerging issues and best practice in all aspects of pavement. So again, please check out our website for more information, or feel free to shoot an inquiry to guides@arb.com.au. And that's it from me. We're happy to take any more questions. And again, if you have any feedback, please either send it through to our email address, or you can put a question in via the webinar toolbar. And that's it from me. Thanks, Rosemary.
Awesome, Zia, thank you. And we have got lots of questions. We'll get through a few. But you and Joe are both down in Melbourne next week at Port Melbourne, aren't you?
Yep, correct. Yep.
That's right. So feel free to come and talk to us about the guides as well if you happen to go to the Smart Pavements workshop.
Awesome. So lots of questions about when will the guides be available, and I think you did say they will be free. What was the... Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. Yes, so that's something we didn't mention, but the intention is to have the draft guides delivered in early December to the local government association. That will then pass it on for review. We'll get feedback, address the feedback in the final version of the guides that we intend to have ready and published, I believe, in April, May next year.
And is there a focus on cost-effective maintenance techniques?
Absolutely. Yes, we identify that as a key driver for local government in terms of how to best and most appropriately maintain their road network in a cost-effective manner. So we will be including some guidance as to those various activities.
And Andrew has asked, will they be endorsed by Austroads at all?
They will be circulated for comment. But and like Zia mentioned previously, we'll get the various agencies and organisations to have a look and provide comment and endorse. And I'm assured that Austroads will be part of that process.
I think also, Rosie, just as I said earlier, that the guides aren't they're not specifications, they're not replacement of current content that's already out there. They're really just a knowledge tool to streamline the information available to local government needs. So they don't need to go through all these different manuals and guides that are out there to find something very simple out. They can go to these new guides and find out what they need very quickly, and then maybe go on to a Austroads guide to technology depending on what they need. So they're definitely not intended to replace what's already there. They're just more of a streamlined knowledge tool.
That's
Okay,
correct.
that makes sense. Thank you. Lachlan wants to know, will there be a focus on alternate and recycled materials as a replacement for virgin materials?
So the materials guide will provide guidance on how best to use natural materials, and also providing some guidance on the different recycled materials that are out there and the anticipated benefits or shortfalls from them. Again, we won't be providing specific specifications around those, but we do envision maybe providing guidance on how people can develop their own specifications for their own materials, depending on what design, what need they need those materials to operate under. So there'll definitely be some guidance on recycled materials and naturally occurring materials.
Is there a plan for a free workshop for local government workers?
We have thought about maybe doing a similar webinar once the guides are published. So whether we do a separate webinar for each guide to kind of touch on, you know, what eventually the contents will be, and maybe in a little bit more detail. I'm not sure what the plan is for another set of outreach workshops. I think it's, yeah, I'm not sure. Joe, have you got any insight?
Yes, I do. So that's been identified as through the various workshops, as well as a need for ongoing or training subsequent to the release of these manuals. So we will be looking at potentially future phases of this project to do additional training as well after the manuals has been released, but that's subject to ongoing funding. But essentially, we'll definitely explore opportunities to provide that training.
Okay, Katie says, great to see sustainable materials noted. How will recycled and claimed material be incorporated into the material guides to support a circular economy? Sorry, apologies if that's a repeated question. Got so many to get through, I'm getting.
Oh, all good.
Awesome.
Yeah, just similar to what I said before, reclaimed materials will provide some basic knowledge on the different options that are out there and how you can assess those, but again, not providing any specific specifications around those materials.
What about software? Matthew's asking, will recommended software be included?
So we're still working through the various delivery platforms. So as part of this project, we will be looking at how best to deliver these guides. And as Zia said, there's a need for an online and an offline version. How exactly that online version will look, that's still under development.
Awesome. And is there any consideration in the guides for unsealed road maintenance in arid regions?
Yes, so the intention will be very much to cover all climatic regions throughout Australia, to provide, obviously, again, it'll be general guidelines and no specific specification around that, but most definitely some guidance around the various climatic conditions.
And Mumi would like you to add some advice on polymer modified asphalts in the guide.
Yeah, I think that'll definitely be covered. We use polymer modified binders pretty regularly, obviously not so much in regional areas, but in urban centres. So that there will definitely be some some general guidance on what is a polymer modified binder to start with, because not everyone might know what that is, and also then what the expected performance pros and cons, and where best to use a polymer modified binder, things like that. So again, not any specifications, but just general guidance on what it is, where best to use it, and that kind of thing.
And then, like Zia said before, then potentially point a reader to some other technical guidelines that's available, such as Austroads, to go and get some more detailed information regarding that particular product.
Yep, correct.
And Deborah has asked, could you please open manual training webinar workshops to subcontractors also?
Yes, I can't. Yeah, no, that's definitely something that we can have a look at. I mean,
Yep,
we generally try to make these events as available as far and wide as possible. Sometimes we don't necessarily always reach everyone, but the intention is certainly there to do that, and we'll look at opportunities to improve on that.
Okay, there's lots of recycling type ones. Is it possible to use plastic as a substitute to sand in asphalt mixes similar to recycled glass? Has ARB carried out any work on converting waste plastic into sand-sized plastic particles to be used as a substitute for natural sand in asphalt added to the mix similar to RAP mixes?
Yeah, go Joe, all good.
Okay, sure. Okay, thanks. Look, we've done some internal work on the use of plastics, and it is most certainly an option. I know that Austroads has recently done a literature review on using recycled plastics in asphalt. So it's still early days as far as specifications and guidelines go, but it is an option that's currently being looked at.
There's quite a few on assets. Justin has asked, will the guidelines provide advice on how to manage the assets within the transport asset portfolio as a network using a hierarchy or risk-based approach?
So I think also in terms of asset management in the workshops, it was a big topic and a lot bigger than maybe we first envisioned. So not fobbing this question off, but I think in the future we'll definitely be developing another suite of guides where we focus a whole guide on asset management. In terms of hierarchy of roads, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was anticipated to be included in the unsealed and sealed roads guide at a minimum, being able to assess the network and benchmark and things like that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and so the intention is that both the sealed and unsealed guides will include a section on asset management that provides some guidance and specifically whole of life costing and such. But like you said, Zia, the intention is in future to develop a standalone asset management document that we believe would provide a lot of benefit to industry based on our feedback from the workshops.
Awesome. Jeff has said that given that the old guides weren't updated for many years, are there any plans to periodically update the new ones or even issue them as dynamic guides, update when required?
This also came up at the workshop I did recently in Perth, and yes, the intention is for these documents to be organic in nature. So as long as we're getting the feedback from local government on these guides, we're happy to update them. So I suppose we'll need to look at setting some kind of feedback loop system in place so that we can get continuous feedback from local government and the users of the guides, so we can keep them updated, unlike the older guides, which have become a little bit stale.
And Stu has asked, is there a broader strategic approach push for funding to make available to local government to address unsealed roads in growth areas, for example, upgrading from unsealed or recycled materials with plastic?
Look, I mean, in terms of a broader objective for funding, I can't necessarily comment on that, but what I can say is in terms of the guides, we will be providing some guidance as to when you reach that tipping point where sealing it out becomes more beneficial than leaving it unsealed. So we'll provide some guidance around those, but in terms of overall funding to local government, it's not something we can comment on at this stage.
Just a comment on timeframes. So local government need good data management practices so that new roads constructed today need not be drilled again after 10 years. From Sadat.
Yes, no, look, I certainly agree with that, and it is something we would mention in the guide that having that data management tool in place is absolutely essential, and it is something that can save you a lot of time and cost in future. So we'll definitely be promoting good data management practices.
And a majority of road network of urban local governments comprise of low volume access roads with asphalt surfacing. Would there be any advice on cost-effective low-cost treatment options for low volume access roads?
Yes,
yeah. Go, Joe. All good. Sorry.
No, that's all good. It's we're sitting in different offices, so we have to work out first who's going to take the question or not. Yeah, no, the intention is to provide some guidance as to the most appropriate and cost-effective pavement types for various applications in the sealed manual. Again, general guidelines or guidance around that.
David has made a comment about practical and technical. So David says he loves the idea of the guides being practical, but as a guide, I'm interested in the balance between practicality and technical requirements. Given the high variation between materials according to the particular local government, will there be some guidance / tables in how to interpret or select material based of any specs of the materials available?
So we'll definitely be including in the materials guide guidance on right down from basics such as what material tests there are, so whether it be a PSD or plasticity limits, and again really describing what indeed those tests are, because not everyone knows what a particle size distribution is, and then also working up to say getting in a little bit more technical, being if your particle size distribution and how your plasticity can play into material performance, and being able to understand if you have a specific material with specific properties. I'm not sure how we're going to present that yet, whether it be a table, but being able to make an assessment of that material based on your traffic, as well as your climate and your moisture, because that's obviously really important. So there will be some guidance on being able to assess your material and understand the expected performance based on the test results and also your operating conditions.
Okay, Leon's asking, has there been any investigation of the inclusion of crumbed car tyres into pavement material for unsealed roads?
Yes, there has, for unsealed roads. No, sorry, my correction there. So there's been a lot of work done over the last couple of years by various road agencies throughout the country, and particularly Western Australia and Queensland Department of Main Roads, to facilitate the increased use of crumb rubber in sprayed seals and asphalt. As so far as to unsealed materials such as unbound granular materials, I'm not aware of anything on that to date. It certainly hasn't been a focus, but we'd happy to take some ideas on board.
And Samuel would like to know, will the guides go into reconstruction methodologies?
They're going to cover general construction guidance and what best practice would look like. But again, not going into a huge amount of details of, you know, step by step. I think we'll definitely provide, this came up actually again at one of the regional workshops I did, wanting to understand the process of constructing a spray seal, for example. They were interested in knowing the actual steps, so simplified 1, 2, 3, 4, but going into the detail of those steps and context around those, then we'd probably reference separately to that, so we don't get too bogged down in our guides, but definitely providing an overview of a step-by-step how to construct different pavement aspects, I think. Joe, I think, would that be about right?
Yes, that's right. In unsealed, our current unsealed guide provides some details on more specifically on maintenance activities, such as the different types of grading you do along a unsealed road, whether it be heavy grading or light grading, dry or wet grading. So there is some details in the current guides that we propose to include in the new guide with some additional information. Again, high level detail, but certainly something that introduces a reader to the main and key aspects of construction and maintenance.
From Kieran, will the use of ocean water be included in the materials guide?
I think my initial thought on that would be a lot of experience has shown that salty water and road pavements don't mix well, whether that being if you're sealing and also an unsealed road. So again, it's good to have that feedback. Maybe we need to do a little bit more poking in the way of ocean water, but my initial thoughts would be the salt in that would be a little bit detrimental to the pavement performance. But Kieran, if you want to send something through to the guides at ARB, I'm happy to look at it and include that if we find that to be relevant.
I'd like just to add on to what Zia just said. There's through some of my workshops that I did in regional Queensland, it came up quite regularly that the use of construction water is very critical, obviously in a dry environment, and the amount of water that we use and the availability of that water can become a real challenge to regional parts of Australia. So it is an interesting one that we might have a look at, but in terms of how far we'll be able to take the use of water in guidelines, that's still something we have to see. But it's definitely a need around providing some more guidance on construction water.
David has asked, will there be information on how, if you are a remote, smaller shire, to conduct materials testing when it's too hard or expensive to get an analyst to attend the shire and take samples for testing?
So this came up in one of my regional workshops as well. Sometimes the size of your project, and also if you're isolated regionally, it can be really expensive and difficult to do some lab testing on materials. So I think the guide will need to include some kind of alternative guidance. So obviously your risk is going to be a little bit higher if you can't test your material, but if you're happy to take on that risk, we might provide some guidance on how to assess a material from the bare minimum that you might have. So yeah, that's definitely come up before.
And just a comment from Leon, going back one, a comment about the ocean water has been used in WA for use up to sub-base level, but high quality water for the base course. And he has used it, hypersaline water for embankment construction.
Okay, cool. That's good feedback. So yeah, thanks for that, Leon. I'll definitely look into that.
Awesome. I'm just about losing my voice now. Some people wanting to know more about types, so we'll send that. Katie says it's important to highlight the risk of legacy issues when incorporating recycled materials into pavements and avoid turning 100% recyclable infrastructure into landfills.
Absolutely. So that is something that the industry is looking at a whole when considering recycled materials, that it needs to be done in a sustainable manner and not creating a potential recycling issue in future. So as an example, asphalt currently is 100% recyclable, the way it is in its current form. So the last thing we want to be doing is introducing a material or an additive that stops that asphalt from being able to be recycled in future. So it is important when considering recycled materials as to how it impacts on the not just the future performance, but the future recyclability and life cycle of the particular product.
And Jeff is asking, will ARRB be working with NHVR to ensure the last mile bridges and pavements accord with the latest vehicle technology?
That is something I'd probably just want to take on notice to get more context as to the latest technology that he's referring to. So maybe if you could send some more information through to us and we can respond directly.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, should we start to talk about some of our final messages, or do you want to take a couple more questions? Any that we don't get to, we will respond by email. What do you want to do, Joe and Zia?
I'm easy.
Yeah, look, I mean, is there many more questions, or have we covered pretty much most of them?
Pretty well covered, and then there's some questions about the individual guides. So will the bridge guide include guidance on building a risk matrix for numerous bridge assets?
It might be best to send that one through, because Josh Seskus, he's handling our bridge guide. So maybe the specific questions about the other guides, maybe email them through Rosie and we can divvy them off to the respective teams.
Okay, awesome. We can do that. All right, well, let's look to some of your key messages to finish up with, and can't wait to see you both next week. It'd be great if anyone's interested in coming next week to the, what are you going to be doing, Joe, next week?
At the Smart Pavements event, I'll be providing a couple of presentations on the use of ATIC, relationships in the design of asphalt, an update on Crumb rubber modified technologies, and then also finally an update on the National Asset Centre of Excellence research program that we have with the Department of Transport and Main Roads. So looking forward to that.
What day is that? That Wednesday, Thursday or Friday?
I'll be talking on both Wednesday and Thursday.
Fantastic. And what about you, Zia?
I'm doing a presentation on Wednesday, and I'll be covering Crumb rubber modified asphalts and the recyclability of those. So kind of what we touched on earlier, what happens when we put recycled additives into our asphalt, you know, what the implications of that are down the track. So I'll be presenting on that on Wednesday, but yes, the Smart Pavements Now masterclass is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Fantastic. And you're both staying in Melbourne, Port Melbourne?
Yep, flying over.
Yep.
Beautiful. That's great. Oh, well, thank you very much to our participants for their awesomeness with the questions. Anything that wasn't answered, we will get back to. Joe and Zia, I will send you the questions that have been typed in, and we can work out how to get answers to people. And we just had a comment from Melissa, one of our panelists, asking road-based test kit. Do you want to make a comment on that?
So the road-based test kit is something that ARB developed quite a few years ago, so in a similar vintage to the manuals. And the point of the road-based test kit is that it's it is what it is. It's a box full of simple items so that you can undertake your own testing on site. So there's a set of sieves, there's a few other things in there, and there's also guidance and a spreadsheet. So you can undertake your own testing in those regional and isolated areas when it's too difficult to send materials to a lab. So I think the materials guide will definitely touch on some of the stuff that was covered by the road-based test kit, and even providing guidance on how you can develop your own kit, and what is a bare minimum that you would need to do that, so that you could do your own testing in-house, low cost.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Okay. So not sure what Mel's written back, so we'll finish up with that. And thank you very much. What a great project that you've been involved in. It's so interesting and mainly so valuable to everyone. And so I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, you too, Rosie. Thanks for running today's webinar, and thanks for everyone for listening. And again, if you have any feedback or ideas for the guides, please send it through so we can assess that.
Yeah, thank you from my side as well.
Awesome. And was it guides at ARB, was it?
guides@arb.com.au.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.